That morning, investigators made the decision to return to the house, this time with fresh eyes and renewed focus. They realized something might have been missed during the initial search, so they expanded their attention beyond just the living areas to include the outbuildings on the property. One utility structure in particular caught their interest. In the basement, inside an ordinary trash bin, they made a surprising discovery: a used napkin. On its own, it might not seem like much, but in an investigation where every detail counts, it stood out. Nearby, they found something even more significant: biological evidence on one of the rugs. During interrogation, the suspect eventually cracked. Pressured by the mounting evidence, he revealed crucial information, the kind that changed everything. Thanks to his confession, investigators were finally able to determine Jessica's location. Dear viewers, please don't forget to like, leave a comment under the video, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos. This is very important to us. In this documentary, we'll explore the real-life case of Jessica Padgett. She was born on a clear December day in 1980 in the heart of Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town known for its quiet charm and tight-knit neighborhoods. From an early age, Jessica stood out, not because she sought attention, but because of the radiant energy she carried with her everywhere she went. A devoted daughter, a loyal friend, and later, a deeply loving mother to 3 children, Jessica's life appeared, at first glance, to be one filled with joy, simplicity, and love. By all accounts, Jessica, affectionately known as Jess, was a beacon of warmth in the lives of those around her. She worked tirelessly at a daycare center in the Lehigh Valley, where she quickly became more than just another employee. Her gentle manner, endless patience, and natural ability to connect with children earned her the admiration of coworkers and parents alike. The little ones she cared for weren't just part of her daily routine. They were, in many ways, an extension of her own heart. To them, she was a source of laughter, comfort, and safety. Outside of work, Jessica's world revolved around family. She was recently married to a man named Micah Padgett, and though they had only been officially husband and wife for 2 months, their relationship stretched back nearly a decade. Together, they raised their 3 children in a home full of laughter, challenges, and shared dreams. Family members and friends described the couple as a team, strong, committed, and determined to give their children the kind of upbringing filled with stability and love. Jessica had a close and affectionate relationship with her mother, Danelle, and her stepfather, Gregory. It was a bond built not only on love, but on mutual respect and support. She would often call her mother every day just to check in, talk about the kids, or share stories from work. Jessica's Facebook page offered glimpses into her world. Photos of smiling children at the park, candid moments at birthday parties, and cozy nights at home. She was the kind of person who remembered every birthday, baked cupcakes for school events, and left handwritten notes in her kids' lunchboxes. Life hadn't always been easy for Jessica. As a young mother, she faced her fair share of hardships. She often worked multiple jobs and made countless personal sacrifices, yet she faced every challenge with strength and grace. She never allowed adversity to break her spirit. Instead, she turned it into motivation, fuel for a life of giving and nurturing. But behind the heartwarming exterior of Jessica's day-to-day life, there were complexities that added quiet strain. She lived in a blended family, and while she navigated those dynamics with apparent calm and maturity, not everything was as harmonious as it seemed. Nonetheless, she never let personal difficulties interfere with her role as a mother or her work with children. Her resilience, it seemed, was boundless. By late 2014, Jessica's life appeared to be on an upswing. She had a stable job she loved, a supportive family, and a new marriage. She had also begun helping out at her stepfather's business on the side, a small operation run next door to her parents' house. Life was busy, yes, but fulfilling. November 21, 2014 began as any other Friday might have. Micah left the house early in the morning, heading off to his job in construction before the rest of the family was even out of bed. Jessica, ever the organized and loving mom, followed shortly after, getting her 2 older children off to school before heading to work with her 2-year-old son in tow. They arrived at the nursery around 8:30 a.m. Like always, she greeted her coworkers with a smile and settled into her routine. Around lunchtime, Jessica let her coworkers know she'd be stepping out briefly. The fax machine at work was malfunctioning, and she needed to send some paperwork. Since her parents' home was just a short 4-mile drive away and her stepdad had a working fax at his business, Jessica decided to run the errand during her break. Her mother, Danelle, was away in Florida, and her stepfather, Gregory, was likely working in the garage or on his truck, so the visit was expected to be quick, just in and out. Jessica called Micah while on the way to her parents' house. He later recalled that she sounded completely normal. Just a little rushed, but cheerful and chatty as always. Nothing seemed out of place. But then, she didn't return to work. Her co-workers grew concerned quickly. Jessica was never late, never unreliable. When she hadn't come back after more than an hour, they began making calls. Eventually, someone reached out to Micah. He was confused and worried. He had seen Jessica that morning, kissed her goodbye, and assumed she had gone about her usual day. When her phone went unanswered, alarm bells started to ring. Jessica's mother, Danelle, still in Florida, was overcome with worry when she heard the news. She began calling Jessica's phone repeatedly, over 100 times back to back, only to reach voicemail each time. Panic set in. She booked the next available flight home. When police reached Jessica's stepfather, Gregory, at his home, he said he hadn't seen Jessica at all that day. He had been busy working outside on his truck and didn't even know she was expected. There was no sign of her car, no sign of her arrival. Authorities wasted no time. They canvassed the area and began circulating her description to local media and residents. Jessica had been last seen wearing a black sweatshirt, gray trousers, and had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. A distinctive footprint tattoo on her shoulder was mentioned in the public alerts. The community of Lehigh Valley, normally quiet and calm, suddenly found itself holding its collective breath. A beloved mother had vanished in the middle of the day without a trace. What was supposed to be a routine trip to a familiar place turned into the beginning of a mystery that no one could have anticipated. The search for 33-year-old Jessica Padgett was now officially underway. Jessica Padgett was last seen during what was supposed to be just another ordinary day in Northampton, a quiet town nestled in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. It was November 2014, and the 33-year-old mother of 3 had started her morning the same way she always did, with love, routine, and a sense of responsibility that everyone around her had come to admire. She had dropped her older kids off at school, taken her youngest child with her to the daycare center where she worked, and gone about her day with her usual warm and upbeat spirit. At lunchtime, Jessica left the daycare to run what seemed like a simple errand. The fax machine at the daycare had been on the fritz, and she needed to send out some documents. She planned to stop at the Distinctive Fence Company, a business operated by her stepfather, Gregory, located near her parents' home. It was a short trip, just a few miles. A quick in and out. But Jessica never came back. Somewhere along that familiar route, she vanished. As news of her disappearance spread, the entire Lehigh Valley region began to mobilize. Local reporter covered the developing story, sharing with viewers how flyers featuring Jessica's face were appearing on light poles, in cafe windows, and outside churches and shopping centers. Her name was suddenly everywhere. A young woman, just recently married with a bright future ahead, had gone missing in the middle of the day. Her best friend, Shah, who had known Jessica for years, was stunned. She told reporters and volunteers that Jessica had been glowing with happiness in the weeks before her disappearance. Her new marriage, her kids, her job, everything had seemed to be going well. She was so content, Shah said. Genuinely happy. The idea that she would just disappear without a trace? It didn't make sense. It wasn't like her at all. Word traveled fast, especially online. Jessica's family launched a Facebook page dedicated to finding her, and within days, more than 8,000 people were following the updates, sharing information, organizing search parties, and flooding timelines with Jessica's picture and pleas for help. The community response was immediate and deeply emotional. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, fields, and roadside ditches. Others went door to door in nearby neighborhoods. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath. Once Jessica's mother, Danelle, arrived back from Florida, where she had been vacationing when the news broke, detectives paid her and Jessica's stepfather, Gregory, a visit. They weren't just checking in. They were starting to ask more direct questions. Specifically, they wanted to know about Jessica's relationship with her husband, Micah Padgett. Investigators often begin with those closest to the missing person, particularly a spouse or partner, and this case was no exception. But Danelle was adamant. There was no way Micah had anything to do with Jessica's disappearance. She said she had been speaking with him constantly since Jess went missing. He was distraught, anxious, and completely engaged in the search. She had never once suspected him. It hadn't even crossed her mind. Jessica's stepfather, Gregory, on the other hand, didn't share the same sentiment. In fact, he had strong opinions, and he didn't hold back. Though he had loved Jessica like a daughter for 20 years, and she had often called him the second best dad she could have hoped for, Gregory had long been skeptical of the men Jessica had chosen. She had a kind heart, he said, but it made her vulnerable. She was a magnet for guys who didn't treat her the way she deserved. He called Jessica's dating history a string of disappointments and admitted he had never liked Micah. Detectives took his words seriously. While Danelle had a close emotional bond with her son-in-law, Gregory was more removed and possibly more objective. He didn't know what Jessica had needed to fax that day, and unfortunately, the office machine had been malfunctioning for several days. There was no log of outgoing faxes or any record of the document she had intended to send. Meanwhile, investigators had started analyzing Jessica's phone data. They discovered that her phone had remained active for several hours after she was last seen, but it wasn't moving. It had stayed in one location, not far from her place of work. Acting on that clue, police officers began canvassing the surrounding area. They eventually reached a local shopping plaza. By this point, it was after hours. Stores were closed, the parking lot was empty, dimly lit only by overhead security lights. Amid the stillness, one vehicle stood out. A white car parked near the edge of the lot. It was Jessica's vehicle. The doors were unlocked. Her purse, phone, keys, and bank cards were all inside, untouched. Her phone was still powered on and receiving calls. Police noted that the driver's seat was positioned in a way that seemed to fit someone of Jessica's height, about 5 feet 4 inches. But investigators were hesitant to draw conclusions just yet. The discovery of her car changed everything. This was no longer a case of someone possibly walking away on their own. It was now being treated as a potential criminal investigation. The district attorney officially confirmed that this was not a standard missing person case. They were now treating Jessica's disappearance as deeply suspicious. Security footage from a nearby gas station provided more chilling insight. At 12:56 p.m., Jessica's car appeared on camera. Then, about 15 minutes later, it reappeared, this time traveling in the opposite direction. At 1:10 p.m., it pulled into the gas station quickly, executed a fast maneuver, and exited with a sharp left turn. It then entered the parking lot where it was ultimately found, at exactly 1:15 p.m. Detectives scrutinized the footage. The person exiting the driver's seat wasn't Jessica. That much was certain. The figure was noticeably taller and wearing light-colored clothing. They stood beside the car briefly, then crouched down, likely adjusting the seat, perhaps in an attempt to make it appear that Jessica had been the last person to drive it. After that, the individual walked off alone, disappearing down an alley that ran alongside the parking area. Moments later, a small white truck was seen speeding down the adjacent road. This sequence raised a multitude of new questions. Was this person trying to stage the scene? Were they familiar with Jessica's routines? Could they have lured her into a trap? Given Gregory's earlier comments, investigators believed her husband Micah might fit the description. He was tall and had light-colored work clothes, but his alibi was solid. He had been on the construction site all day, surrounded by co-workers who could vouch for his presence. He was accounted for. The mysterious driver, their identity still unknown, had left behind no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no definitive clues. Just more unanswered questions. Jessica's photo remained posted on nearly every street corner, coffee shop, and community board. Her case had captured the hearts of the community and beyond. But despite their dedication, the most critical piece of the puzzle, Jessica herself, was still missing. What happened to Jessica Padgett after she left the daycare that day? Who was the person driving her car? And why had they gone to such lengths to make it look like she was still alive? In the days following Jessica Padgett's disappearance, emotions were running high. Her family was living trapped between uncertainty and fear. Danelle, Jessica's mother, was especially devastated. The pain of not knowing where her daughter was had begun to unravel her. She was barely sleeping. She could hardly speak without her voice cracking. But through it all, her husband, Gregory Graff, Jessica's stepfather, remained calm, steady, supportive. He tried to reassure Danelle constantly, telling her they would find Jessica soon, that it was just a matter of time. The community held on to hope. Flyers continued to circulate. Social media remained active with tips and well wishes. Police followed every lead. And then, a breakthrough came. Investigators had received enhanced footage from a parking lot surveillance camera, capturing the scene where Jessica's white vehicle had been abandoned. The frame-by-frame analysis had taken time, but when experts finally zoomed in on a key detail, it stopped them cold. A white truck seen leaving the parking area had distinctive markings along the side. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the officers leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. "That's Gregory Graff's truck," he said, Jessica's own stepfather. The realization sent a ripple through the investigation. Detectives had already spoken with Gregory several times. He had cooperated, seemed concerned, even emotional. But now the timeline, the footage, and the circumstances all demanded another conversation. Investigators returned to Gregory, this time with sharper questions. He didn't deny that it was his truck. In fact, he admitted to being in the parking lot, but insisted the timing was purely coincidental. According to him, he had parked there earlier in the day to work on a minor mechanical issue. Afterward, he said, he stopped at the gas station for something to eat. But the video contradicted this. The truck was seen driving past the gas station, not into it. And it didn't appear to have been sitting idle for any significant period of time. It came, parked, and left. All in a matter of minutes. Gregory claimed that when he got back to his office, part of the property adjacent to the home he shared with Danelle, his employees were coming and going, collecting their pay slips. He said everything was normal. Jessica, according to him, had never arrived. Several employees did confirm they had spoken to him that day, that he was discussing weekend plans, and that there was no sign of Jessica when they were there. Still, something about Gregory's account wasn't sitting right with detectives. It wasn't just the timing or the truck. It was the subtle unease in his tone. The way he spoke too carefully, too calmly. The kind of calm that doesn't come from innocence but from rehearsed control. Investigators made the decision to return to the house once more. This time with a fresh perspective and renewed scrutiny. They focused not just on the living quarters, but also on the outbuilding where Gregory ran his small business. That's where they found something surprising. The fax machine, which Gregory had previously told them was broken, was in perfect working order. Not only that, but they were able to recover the fax Jessica had sent, the very reason she had gone there in the first place. It was a health insurance policy, and the timestamp read 1:04 p.m. This detail confirmed what they had suspected. Jessica had been inside the house. Now they began to dig deeper. Downstairs in the basement, in a bin, they found a used tissue. They also found biological material, evidence, on one of the carpets. When asked about it, Gregory casually claimed it was probably from his hunting activities. He was, after all, an avid outdoorsman. But that explanation didn't hold weight, especially not in the context of everything else they were discovering. Then something unexpected happened. As the officers continued their inspection, Gregory went upstairs and stepped outside. He said he needed a cigarette. What he said next, however, caught everyone's attention. While lighting his cigarette, he quietly muttered that he was sad he wouldn't be able to see his dogs anymore. It was a peculiar thing to say. No one had mentioned anything about him being taken into custody. And yet, it seemed as though he already knew what was coming. The officers could feel it. They said later they sensed it. The moment a person decides to tell the truth. Not out of guilt, necessarily, but because they know the walls are closing in. Gregory Graff was about to confess. As he was led away from the home, Danelle, still unaware of what was unfolding, she looks at him, demanding to know where her daughter was. It was the last time she ever spoke to him. Later that day, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli stood before cameras and confirmed what many had feared. The case was now officially a criminal investigation. Gregory Graff had made a full confession to detectives. He told them that he had invited Jessica over under the pretense of needing help with his computer. She had agreed. After all, she needed to send a fax anyway, and the house was familiar, a place she had been to countless times. She trusted him. At 1 p.m., Jessica sent her fax. She was seated at the desk, her back to Gregory. Then everything happened. He later admitted that after the incident, he quickly ran outside to her car. He drove it to the parking lot near the gas station and staged the scene to make it appear as though Jessica had simply vanished. He adjusted the seat, abandoned her belongings inside, and walked away. He then returned home in his truck, just in time to greet his employees, who were none the wiser. DA Morganelli explained that Gregory Graff, age 53, would be charged in the disappearance and death of his 33-year-old stepdaughter, Jessica Padgett. The fact that Jessica's mother had been out of town and that Gregory had chosen a time when he would not be interrupted suggested careful planning. The charges could rise to capital murder depending on how the case developed. There was one detail that especially disturbed investigators and the public alike. Gregory was asked whether he understood the gravity of his actions. His answer was chilling in its indifference. He showed no remorse. None. In fact, he reportedly said he wished he had chosen his neighbor instead of Jessica. This was the same man Jessica had publicly praised on her Facebook page just months earlier. On Father's Day, she had posted a heartfelt message. "Two dads, and I love both of mine very much." Her words now echoed with unbearable irony. Jessica's family and community were left heartbroken. The light she brought into the lives of others was extinguished in the most unfathomable way. As the legal process began, those who loved her struggled to comprehend how someone so trusted, so close, could be responsible for such a betrayal. After hearing the full, devastating truth about what her husband had done to her daughter, Danelle could do nothing but collapse into a corner of the room. The words she'd just heard, words no mother should ever have to process. Her mind trying to understand how someone she had trusted with her life, with her family, had been capable of such cruelty. It was not just grief she was feeling. It was betrayal, shock, and a loss so profound it defied explanation. Jessica's stepfather, 53-year-old Gregory Graff, a resident of Covered Bridge Road in Allen Township, was now in state police custody. The man once considered a quiet, supportive presence in the family was officially charged with criminal homicide. Authorities confirmed that he had confessed to his role in Jessica Padgett's death. And in a further blow to the family's already shattered trust, investigators revealed that Gregory had even taken part in the community-led search efforts for Jessica while fully knowing what had really happened. He walked alongside volunteers, handed out flyers, and offered encouragement to others, all while maintaining the terrible secret of what he had done. Law enforcement officials said that Gregory's story had never quite made sense, even from the beginning. His timeline was fuzzy. His demeanor didn't quite match the urgency of the situation. As the investigation continued, more contradictions began to surface, and soon the focus of the entire case shifted directly onto him. Police confirmed they had searched his home, and by the time Gregory was brought in for formal questioning, Investigators had already gathered enough conflicting details to press him harder. During his interrogation, he eventually revealed information that pointed them to where Jessica could be found, removing any remaining doubt about his involvement. The district attorney acknowledged that early in the investigation, Gregory had been on their radar. His statements had been inconsistent, and his version of events simply didn't line up with what investigators were uncovering. The timeline, physical evidence, and even his own behavior raised red flags. In a crucial meeting on Monday, police presented the DA's office with a collection of troubling inconsistencies in Gregory's statements. And within just 48 hours, those inconsistencies evolved into a full confession. What stunned both investigators and the public was the absence of any prior conflict between Jessica and Gregory. There were no known disputes, no suspicious interactions, no tension, at least not outwardly. Jessica had previously worked for Gregory in a limited capacity and had routine access to his house. Their relationship had always been described as cordial, warm, even close. That level of trust, in hindsight, is what made this crime so incomprehensible. As the news spread, an online fundraiser was quickly launched to support Jessica's 3 children. Donations poured in, not just from family and friends, but from strangers across the country who had been touched by Jessica's story. In just over a week, nearly 300 people had donated, and the total quickly surged past $20,000. It was a small beacon of hope in the midst of overwhelming heartbreak, proof that kindness and community still existed, even in the face of such darkness. Prosecutors revealed that under Pennsylvania state law, a murder committed in the course of another felony could qualify for capital punishment. There was serious discussion about whether or not the aggravating circumstances in this case would meet that standard. Jessica had been lured to the house under false pretenses. Her mother had been out of town. Gregory had staged the crime scene and misled investigators. All of it pointed to premeditation. Despite his admissions during questioning, Gregory Graff later pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. His defense team attempted to downgrade the charges to third-degree murder, even going so far as to push for an insanity defense. The prosecution, however, remained firm. They believed this was a calculated and deliberate act. They wanted the highest charge possible. In the courtroom, tensions ran high. Jessica's family filled the gallery each day, hoping for justice. When it came time to deliver her victim impact statement, Jessica's sister, Chris, stood before the man who had taken her sister away and spoke with fierce emotion. "I hope you fear for your life every day," she told Gregory, her voice steady, unwavering. "And I hope someday you feel some form of genuine remorse." Gregory dabbed at his eyes with a tissue, but Chris wasn't convinced. "You're pretty good at faking it," she added. "What I've learned from this trial is that you still don't regret what you did. You don't even care. You could have accepted responsibility from the beginning. But instead, you forced us to endure this trial, to relive every terrible detail of what happened." Gregory offered a quiet apology before being escorted out of the courtroom. But the damage had already been done. His words felt hollow, empty. Following the trial, Donnell officially filed for divorce from Gregory. She wanted no legal or emotional ties to the man. But even then, Gregory continued to exert control. He refused to sign the divorce documents, citing disagreements over the financial terms and dragging out the process. It was yet another cruel twist in a story already riddled with pain. Adding insult to injury, Gregory filed an appeal, claiming his attorney had not represented him adequately. He argued that he didn't fully understand what was happening during the initial investigation. He claimed that during Untold with Jessica, he had blacked out and had no memory of what occurred after that. The defense pushed for a second trial, but the family and community viewed it as nothing more than a stalling tactic. Christ remained vocal. She believed that Gregory's crime deserved the maximum term, even if the legal thresholds for such a sentence hadn't been met. For her to be harmed by someone she loved and trusted so deeply, she said, that alone is already the cruelest punishment for this family to bear. Throughout the ordeal, Jessica's husband, Micah, remained a symbol of quiet strength. His heartbreak was obvious, but so was his gratitude for the people who had come together in their darkest hour. seeing how many people showed up to help search for her. It was overwhelming, he said. But it reminded us that there are still good people in the world. That was one of the only things that kept us from falling apart. Micah described Jessica as the most incredible person he had ever known. Her smile, her energy, the way she loved her children, those memories would never fade. It's heartbreaking to know that this is our forever now, he said. This is the story we have to live with. But we're trying to get through it together, because this wasn't just a hit on one person. It affected all of us, the whole family, the entire community. And so, even in the shadow of tragedy, the community vowed to move forward, to honor her memory, to hold one another up through the grief. Because if there was one thing Jessica Padgett's life had taught them, it was the enduring power of love and the unbreakable strength of family. Those words, spoken by Micah Padgett, echoed through the courtroom and lingered in the air like a memory no one wanted to let go of. It was hard for anyone present to truly capture what Jessica meant to the people who knew her best. For Micah, Jessica had been everything: his partner, his support system, his peace. Her absence had left a silence that was impossible to fill. As the trial for Gregory Graff, Jessica's stepfather, reached its emotional conclusion, it was no longer just about legal proceedings. It had become a confrontation between truth and deception, between justice and betrayal. Over the course of the trial, prosecutors laid out every disturbing detail. But it was the evidence found on Gregory's personal computer, text documents and files that could not be unseen, that left the jury stunned. As those documents played, the mood in the courtroom changed completely. What had already been a tragic and incomprehensible case now crossed into deeply unsettling territory. Members of the jury, many of them ordinary citizens who had volunteered to carry the burden of judgment, sympathized openly. Others lowered their heads, too disturbed to make eye contact with anyone. Not even the defense attorney who sat stone-faced beside his client. The silence in the courtroom was described as suffocating. After the evidence presentation and the attorney's final arguments, the courtroom sat heavy in anticipation of the verdict. But it didn't take long. David, the jury foreman, later spoke with quiet conviction about what happened behind those deliberation room doors. "It's something I will never forget," he said. "Anyone who says they weren't affected, either they're lying or they don't have a soul. That's how disturbing it was." David recalled that when he asked for a show of hands for a verdict, every single juror raised their hand immediately. No debate, no hesitation. "Honestly, it took longer to sign the paperwork than it did to vote," he said. Within just 6 minutes, the jury returned to the courtroom and read their decision aloud. The outcome was clear. Gregory Graff was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom sat frozen for a moment before quiet murmurs spread. Relief, sadness, justice, all mixing in a surreal moment of finality. By law, a first-degree murder conviction in Pennsylvania carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. That would be Gregory's fate. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, alone with the choices he had made and the family he had betrayed.